did you get involved with this project and writing this song?
Well, it started, the producer, Eric Israelian, is a friend of mine and a friend of the family's. And my wife is Greek, and so there was kind of a Greek and Armenian connection with him, after we met him, because they share similar histories. And he had mentioned the idea of the film in passing a few times, but at some point about 3 years ago, we started seriously talking about the subject matter, and it had nothing to do with me writing a song. It was just both of us being passionate about the fact that there's a denial involved with the Armenian genocide that obviously is unhealthy, and reparation needs to be made, but also that there are current situations where this is occurring, and I think a line needs to be sort of drawn from the stories of the past to now. And so we were having a lot of conversations about it, and at some point it came up, would you like to write the song for the film? And I couldn't say no. It's a dramatic thing to feel like I'm a part of and to write a song about and to sort of be asked to be involved in,
I mean, it seems like a world that would be so huge, but you've always been fairly political in your music.
For me, I've never sort of focused on being political in songwriting. Mm-hmm. It's just more of when the mood strikes me. But especially in terms of writing a song for a film, I've done a lot of them, and they're the ones that I think are emotionally charged are the ones that are the most rewarding. And this one I think was probably the most challenging and intimidating, really, because I myself am not Greek, though my wife is. I'm not Armenian. It's not really my history or my story, but I'm passionate about the story being told. And so I just didn't want to let anybody down.
The Promise is a 2016 historical war drama film directed by Terry George. Set in the final years of the Ottoman Empire, the film's plot is about a love triangle during the Armenian genocide. The Promise premiered in the United States on April 21st, 2017, and it featured the final single released by Chris Cornell, who died less than a month after the film's US release. The Armenian genocide took place between the spring of 1915 and the fall of 1916. As many as 1.5 million, mostly Christian Armenians, were murdered. As Chris mentioned, one of the movie producers is Eric Israelian, a physician at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. We will come back to him later. During the 1990s, Soundgarden, predictably, agreed with liberal activism. The lead singer cared deeply about social issues and never stuck to singing about personal problems. Just like many of their contemporaries, they supported the pro-choice feminist movement in America. One can debate whether this was by their own philosophy or some agenda these alternative rock bands were supposed to follow in unison, knowingly or unknowingly. As a musician and someone who struggled with the RC social circles, I can tell you that you will not be given the same opportunities if you choose to denounce these crooked agendas. The Pacific Northwest music scene agreed on these liberal policies, and going against the grain usually ended up in isolation.
I would like it if we could go back to the early 90s
Sure.
with Soundgarden and what happened, and maybe focus a little bit on your audience back then and what your music did to change.
Okay. Great.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
Great.
And we are at speed, and with you?
What?
We're ready to go. We're rolling.
We're rolling.
Yep.
Cool. So when Soundgarden started, what was your ambition?
Really, at the time that Soundgarden first started, it was just three of us. It was me and Kim Thile on guitar and Hiro Yamamoto on bass, who had become my roommate. And he played bass and I played drums at the time. And because we lived together, we thought, well, we're a rhythm section, let's start a band. And I had been in several bar bands at the time from about 17 to then, I think I was 20. And I had this idea or this ambition that if I were a fantastic drummer and just focused on what I did and was very great, that some fantastic band that wrote great songs would knock on my door and say, come be in my band. There was a term which was called alternative music, and at the time what that meant was it was virtually anything that wasn't part of the mainstream, that wasn't part of the status quo. It later became a genre which included certain things and excluded certain things. It meant sort of jangly guitar, or what was sort of becoming a college music sound. The lyrical themes tended to be darker, tended to be more social-oriented. It didn't have to do with girls and cars and drugs and the things that were kind of considered to be rock music themes of the period. So it was very different in that regard. We didn't really have any idea that what we were doing would ever become part of the commercial status quo or become commercially successful. And there were no people, no record labels at that time coming to Seattle looking around to sign the next rock band that would sell millions of records. That didn't happen. But that's also a big reason why I think the music was so strong, because we were all doing it just literally for the sake of entertaining ourselves and making good music. I think that that's somewhat generational, a response to the music that we had been hearing that was part of the mainstream, not being interested in it, wanting to present something else that's going on, which included a lifestyle. My band, you know, by no measure was a straight edge band, but we didn't participate in what you think of as like normal rock activities out on the road. It wasn't a room full of strippers and tons of drugs and going out to parties every night. We weren't that way. You know, half the band were college educated. We all read books. We were sports fans maybe, but it wasn't. There were very few similarities between us and what was the rock status quo at the time. There was no Seattle band that you could compare to like Def Leppard when it came to going and seeing the show. And I literally have friends that would come to a Soundgarden show and be backstage in the dressing room and be looking around and be completely disappointed because it looked just like this. Maybe there would be a bottle of whiskey on the table or something, but that was it. There were no drugs, there were no prostitutes or groupies or anything like that. And we would be having kind of roundtable discussions and arguments about philosophy and things that interested us and playing records for each other. It was surreal. It was really hard, I think, to even digest or understand. It also immediately changed the scene. It in a sense, kind of destroyed the scene. The first time, for example, I went to Hollywood and we were taking meetings with Geffen Records and A&M Records. The first time I ever saw Sunset Strip, I was with Kim, and there was a Tower Records, and there was a big to-do because David Lee Roth's first solo record was coming out. And he was a mountain climber or something, so they built this sort of giant fake Matterhorn on the top of Tower Records, and he was rappelling down it. And there were cameras and everyone there to see that. And Kim and I saw that, and we just walked the other direction as quickly as we could.
It so happens that, at the time, Chris was married to his first wife, Susan Silver. They started dating in 1985, and she became the manager for Soundgarden a year later. She also managed the notorious Seattle bands Alice in Chains and Screaming Trees. The couple finally tied the knot in 1990. Susan is infamous for her liberal activism and friendship with CIA asset Gloria Steinem, a journalist and activist who emerged as a nationally recognized leader of second-wave feminism in the late 1960s and early 1970s, after championing abortion, among other social engineering agendas. Although Susan was undeniably a way better wife and partner than Vicky would ever be, Chris described this relationship as controlling.
I've had that from probably my early teen years, from like 14.
What could be the biggest lesson?
Well, one of the lessons is depression can be a good thing because it can sort of force you to change things in your life that are bothering you. If you're depressed because, say, you're in a bad relationship, which is something that happened to me, I really put up with it a lot longer than I should have because I didn't want to go through the pain and the just the trouble of changing my life in that way. But depression sort of forced me into eventually a lot of bad behavior and then having to make a decision, that I have to be strong. And I didn't deal with it very well. It was sort of cowardly. And then eventually I had to be brave and do what I was supposed to do and make the decisions and change my life. And so on that level, depression can be really good. I also think it can be something where in writing music, if you allow yourself to feel it while you're writing music, you can really change your own mood and relate to other people. Like there are a lot of people who have anxiety, who have depression, who have anger. Not just people who want to hear love songs. Everyone falls in love, but everyone also gets depressed. Everyone gets angry. Everyone gets anxious, and there's a lot of anxiety. And I always found as a kid that if I listened to someone who was writing a depressed song, like a Pink Floyd song or something, it made me feel better because I knew there was someone that out there that thought like I did, and I wasn't alone in my experience.